Hi, I'm Gary White for Central Kentucky Television, here at Springview Hospital with Dr. Paul DeFranco with Kids Care Pediatric, affiliated with Springview Hospital here in Lebanon. And today we're going to talk about prematurity. How common is the problem of prematurity?
The problem of prematurity is sort of rampant right now in this country, but what is confounding about the problem and the rise of it is that we've had so much good news about prematurity over the last decade. Teenage pregnancies are down, teenage smoking is down, and more women than ever are getting prenatal care. Unfortunately, the bad news is that the prematurity rate now is up to 14%, which is about a 30% increase over the last decade.
What is the impact of this problem?
Well, you can never underestimate the impact that prematurity has on someone. It's estimated that 70% of all neonatal deaths, neonatal morbidity, and neonatal costs, which are important in today's economic climate, are directly linked to delivery before 37 weeks gestation.
What has the medical profession done to correct this problem?
Well, what we've done to correct the problem is really has two parts to it: the obstetrician and the neonatologist. The obstetricians now do not deliver anyone electively less than 37 weeks. And it should really be less than 39 weeks. But at 37 weeks, we usually use the cutoff as to when it becomes high risk. There's also different treatments for stopping labor now, or preventing the mother from even going into labor rather than try and stop it once it begins. From a neonatal point of view, it's been mostly technical advances. The best example I could give you would be that in 1963, President Kennedy had a son while he was in the White House, Patrick Bouvier Kennedy. He weighed 4 pounds and was 34 weeks gestation, and he died in a couple days from the complications of prematurity. In 2010, at the University of Kentucky, we had 99 babies that fulfilled that criteria of 4 pounds and 34 weeks and had 1 mortality. So you can see how once the baby is out, we're able to do a lot better work than we were before. Unfortunately, the number of babies that we're presented with keeps going up because of the 14% incidence of prematurity.
Are there certain characteristics that are unique to the United States?
Surprisingly, yes. If you look at the statistics, is that we have more neonatologists per 10,000 births than either Canada, the UK, or Australia. We have more neonatal beds per 10,000 births than Canada, UK, or Australia. Yet our neonatal mortality is higher than any of those countries. Surprisingly, when you look at the numbers, you have to take into consideration how many babies die a year. And the number is staggering worldwide. There's 130 million births a year. It's estimated that 4 million die in the first 28 days, which is our neonatal period. Another 4 million are stillborn. If you do the math on that, that comes to 450 babies every hour that die around the world. Now, the World Health Organization has said, let's just look at the rich companies. Now, how they define rich, we're industrialized with access to health care, sanitation, and such. They found 39 countries that qualified as what they would call, quote, rich countries. They only accounted for 1% of all those deaths. And yet in the United States, which you would think would be the most affluent country, we have other countries that are doing better than us with less resources, less doctors, and less availability of beds.
Why then does the prematurity rate continue to rise?
Well, when you look at the traditional causes of prematurity, there were 4. One was premature onset of labor. And since the onset of labor is such a heterogeneous process, there's not a magic bullet to stop it once it starts. The most we can get out of it, or the most we try to get out of it, is a delay of 48 hours. Then you have a second cause, was premature rupture of the membranes, when the bag of water breaks. Again, most we can get out of that is about 48 hours. Thirdly, we have what we call doctor discretion. That is, we decide to deliver the baby early because either the maternal condition or the fetal condition warrants the evacuation of the baby from a mother that is hypertensive, or the baby's not growing well, or whatever the environment is deemed to be hostile to the baby or the mother, and we take the baby early. Now, surprisingly, Those three causes, which are 3/4 of the common causes of prematurity, have decreased. We're doing better. But there's been a new culprit raise its head, which is the artificial reproductive technology, in which the fertilization of the egg to the sperm takes place outside the body. And today, it's thought that 1 out of every 100 babies born in this country, 1% of all babies born in this country are a product of artificial reproductive technology.
Could you please explain artificial reproductive technology, or ART?
The old way, you know, every parent has come up with this thing their child's going to ask them, you know, where do babies come from? And all you have to do is go to a bookstore now and go into the infertility section and look where babies come from. There are some 50 artificial methods of conceiving now, so that mothers who nature had seen to it not to get pregnant before are able to get pregnant now. And we've been very evolved as a species to allow this to happen. We know that psychologically the need to have children is the basic human drive. But on a more physiologic basis, the human reproductive tract is very flexible and can be easily manipulated. So that we can now take an egg from the mother, fertilize it out of the body, and replace it back in the mother. That's artificial reproductive technology. And again, 1 out of every 100 babies in this country are a product of such a process. The main problem with artificial reproductive technology, philosophically, is there's no legislation. There was a scribe for King Charles II in the 16th century that was he was the husband in a childless marriage, and he went to his doctor and wanted to know what he could do about it. And the doctor said, well, you know, wear loose underwear and tilt the bed in a Trendelenburg position during sex. And then for 300 years, not much happened. That was the treatment of infertility, loose underwear and tilting the bed. Then in 1976, I believe, which is kind of appropriate, we'd be talking about this now because the first test tube baby was born, Louise Brown. Last week, the mother of Louise Brown died. But that was the first test tube baby. Now, what happened to the fertility specialists with no legislation? They got so courageous by their success with the test tube that for 300 years nothing happened. 1976 or 78, Louise Brown's born. Now, in this country alone, there are 500 artificial reproductive training or reproductive technique centers. 500. The problem is, not away from the philosophical problem of no legislation, is that the implantation of more than one baby. Whenever you have multiples, which we define as plurality, you have problems. Any mother carrying twins has a 1 in 5 chance of the following. 1 in 10 chance of the following. Any mother carrying triplets or a higher order has a 1 in 5 chance of the following. That if your pregnancy goes to 20 weeks, regardless of how it was conceived, whether artificially or naturally, you have the 1 in 5 and 1 in 10 chance of having a neonatal death, a stillborn, or a child with cerebral palsy. You cannot add plurality to the uterus without complications. 44% of all ART pregnancies have twins. 19% triplets or higher orders. Therefore, while we don't have 1 out of every 100 women having artificial reproductive technology, we still end up with the 1% because there are multiples. And that's where the issue comes. Plurality in the pregnancy makes what is supposed to be a very easy process, whereas the World Health Organization, when they wax poetic, they say reproduction is a perilous process. When you add ART to it, it is.
What problems are unique to ART?
Well, the problems come in with the prematurity. There are a few syndromes that they are more likely to have, but they're so rare in the general population that they're unique to them and we don't worry about them. The main problem is you add prematurity risk factors to anyone who's carrying more than one baby in their uterus. And with those babies, you get all the problems of prematurity. Now, 90% of the babies born through ART are normal. 10% have issues, and the issues basically almost exclusively revolve around the fact that they're delivered too soon.
What can a woman do to help prevent a premature birth?
The first thing you could do would be the general health of the mother. That is the health of the mother before she gets pregnant. The other is weight control, particularly blood pressure control. There is situations called gestational diabetes where mothers who are not diabetic become in a diabetic state when they're pregnant. Control of all the conditions that affect the mother. You have to have regular prenatal visits. A lot of the moms that are worried about it are sent to maternal fetal specialists in Cincinnati or Lexington. But again, another interesting point is that I mentioned before that as a country we have more neonatologists per 10,000 births, more maternal fetal medicine people per 10,000 births, but we still practice what we call, particularly in this area, the law of inverse care. That is, the availability of medical care varies inversely with the general population that needs it. All our doctors seem to be centered in major cities. We don't have them in rural places. The maternal fetal medicine specialists, the neonatologists, they're not out in the rural area. There are, in Lexington, a small city, 3 maternal fetal medicine groups, non-cooperative. That is, not that they're at war with each other, but they don't work together. They're separate entities. There are 3 intensive care nurseries in a town the size of Lexington. And yet there are no intensive care nurseries for about a 5-county area here. There are no maternal fetal medicine doctors until you get to Louisville or Lexington. That's where the issue is the mother getting to the doctor to establish that she is at high risk.
What is Springview Hospital doing to improve its facilities in this area?
Here at Springview, we are expanding our capabilities in the nursery, and the hospital has been very cooperative in upgrading the equipment that allows us to take care of more complicated babies. We also have a real good working relationship now with COSAIR and University of Kentucky that are sending babies back to our nursery when a baby is born here that we can provide the care for. We transfer the mother to a center that can. In the event that we don't have time to transfer the mother, and this does occur, or that we have an unforeseen problem, and it is beyond our capabilities here, we transfer the baby to COSAIR. We have been able to take care of more complicated babies in the last year as our equipment has improved and our nurse training has improved to the point where now the major centers have enough confidence in our ability to care for the baby that they're sending the baby back actually before it's discharged, that we can do the latter part of the care. So things are going in the right direction. We will never be able to compete with COSAIR in this area. We will never be able to compete with University of Kentucky. But we are getting to the point now where we are an established mid-level nursery.
I've been talking with Dr. Paul DeFranco with Kids Care Pediatric in Lebanon, affiliated with Springview Hospital. Give them a call and make an appointment for your child.